The parable of those who take protecting friends other than Allah is like that of the spider spinning its shelter, and the flimsiest of all shelters is certainly that of the spider, if only they knew. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Hope you guys are all very well and in the best of health, and looking forward to another episode of the podcast. So, in today's episode, we're talking about the spider, as you may have gathered from the previous reading. That's from Qur'an.com, and the translation, once again, is from Dr. Mustafa Khattab. So we are talking about the spider in this session. I believe it's episode 4 in our series on animals from the Qur'an. And so that's what we're going to be doing, inshallah. So the spider is actually only mentioned twice in the Qur'an. Even though the whole surah is named after the spider, it's Suratul Ankabut. It's actually only mentioned twice, and those two times are both in the same ayah, are both in this one ayah. So we'll be going through it kind of word for word and talking a little bit about the word ankabut as well as the use of it in this particular ayah. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of the podcast, I do want to remind you that there are still some spaces left for Arabic in 60 Steps exclusive. We will be running live sessions throughout the whole of April, May, June, and probably some of July as well, inshallah. We'll see how it goes. But basically, Arabic in 60 Steps exclusive, it's for one thing. It's for me to personally mentor a class size of 8 of you maximum. It may be as few as 5, it might be as many as 8. It depends on the students who join. But so it's essentially for me to take you under my wing personally, give you about 4 hours of my time a week live for 3 months, and for me to basically say to you, look, I'm making it my responsibility to graduate you in that time. So obviously we'll be out throughout the whole of Ramadan, inshallah, so there's opportunity to benefit a lot throughout the month of Ramadan when we're having our sessions together. And I'll leave a link in the what do you call it? Not the description box, the show notes. That's what we call it on a podcast, isn't it? If you to go and check it out. The Arabic in 60 Steps exclusive. But that's the only announcement for today. So we'll jump straight into it, inshallah. So let's start with the very word ankabut. Al-ankabut. You might notice al-ankabut, it doesn't really fit into any of the patterns that we're familiar with. You know, maybe 99% of the time in Arabic, you can kind of spot either like a 3-letter root or a 4-letter root. But Arabic, I mean, how many letters do we have in it which sort of look like they could be root letters? We have like an ayn at the beginning, a noon, anka, maybe a kaf as well, ayn, noon, kaf, anka, bu, and then a ba, and then a ta at the end. So there's like 5 letters, right? So, and the plural of it though is anakib, anakib. So the ta on the end is removed. But what seems most likely is that the word ankabut is a foreign word. It's not actually an originally Arabic word. Would kind of be a conclusion. Would maybe seem like the most the most likely thing, because I don't believe I can't think of any other words in Arabic that take a ankabut pattern. But the plural anakib, it's quite common. I mean, many other animals and other words use that kind of plural as well. I mean, the word for a spider, aqrab or aqraba. The plural is aqarib, just like anakib. An aqraba is a scorpion. But an ankabut is a spider, the plural of which, as I say, is anakib. Good. So how does this one ayah begin? So as I mentioned, like the only mention of the spider is in this one ayah. It's not a small surah of the Qur'an either. I mean, it's quite a big surah, but it all gets its name from this particular passage. So Allah begins this ayah with مثل الذين اتخذوا من دون الله أولياء. Okay, we'll stop there for a second. So, مثل. A مثل is like a parable of something or an example of something. If Allah gives an example, to give an example is ضرب مثلا. He'll often use that in the Quran. In Arabic, you don't give an example. You don't use the verb أعطى, يعطي, to give. You strike an example. That's how Arabic uses giving an example of something. So الذين, sort of the ones who. So the example or the parable of the ones who اتخذوا. So this verb اتخذ, it comes from the root letters أخذ. I mean, the verb أخذ in the form 1 just means to take something. أخذ يأخذ. Is the verb to take. But what about اتخذ? اتخذ would be the form 8. And it seems to be used specifically for taking something as something. So, for example, in Surah Al-Kahf, I believe, Allah speaks of Allah taking a son, right? He uses the same kind of word about Allah not taking a son. And here we see that it's the parable of those who take min dunillah, they take before Allah, right? Dun, and it's different to qabl, though. You might have heard of the term qabl as being before. Typically, you use the term qabl in terms of time. If something is before something, you say, وَقَبْلَ ذَلِكَ, and before that, we did whatever, right? But dun is more in terms of preference, right? Is what the case is here. So it's saying, the parable of those who take min dunillah, they take before Allah, awliya'a, they take awliya'a before Allah. What are they? So who are awliya, by the way? They are protecting friends. I think is a good way of putting it. The actual translation just says protectors, but but protecting friends as well. I've heard scholars use the term protecting friends, and I think it's more encompassing of the full meaning of the word. So, the parable of those who take before Allah friends or protecting friends, like what? Kamathali, like the parable of, they are of the likeness of al-ankabut. They are like the spider. Doing what? Ittakhadhat baytan. Ittakhadhat baytan. I assume the verb ittakhadhat is referring back to the spider being feminine, perhaps. I actually wasn't aware before having a look at this that the word ankabut is actually feminine, but it looks like it is. The spider taking baytan. The spider taking a house. Right? We know that spiders don't live in houses. It's about the spider spinning its web, or the spider building its home, perhaps. Good. وَإِنَّ أَوْهَنَ الْبُيُوتِ وَإِنَّ. Good. And indeed. This inna is sort of and certainly. أَوْهَنَ. The root of this is around things being flimsy or being fragile. So أَوْهَنُ is for something to be the most flimsy or the most fragile. But it's أَوْهَنَ because of inna that comes before it. So inna أوهن البيوت. Indeed, the most fragile of the houses. إن أوهن البيوت is what? لبيت. لبيت العنكبوت is the house of the ankabut, is the home of the spider. Because of the way in which Allah is presenting this ayah, right? Like the whole ayah is about choosing your friends wisely, right? It's about people who people who take as protectors other than Allah. It's similar to how a spider's house is weak, right? But not necessarily in terms of like how flimsy it is. You're like obviously it is weak to humans. We can go and just break up the web, can't we? But it's more about like I've heard many khutbahs in the past about it being to do with the actual family structure of spiders. Like spiders don't have families. They're not like well, they're not even insects, so it wouldn't be right to compare them to ants. Obviously, live in huge colonies, or bees that live in hives. But they're arachnids, obviously, and they don't have partners. I believe actually it's even I don't know if it's actually the female that actually eats the male. Like after the male's sort of done his job and given her eggs, she just munches him. Like he's of no use anymore. They don't even have like a family structure, let alone like a community structure or anything like that. So, but perhaps Allah is speaking of your choices to take people before Allah is a little bit like it makes your community structure weaker than that of the spider. Good. لو كانوا يعلمون. If only كانوا, if only they did يعلمون, if only they knew, right? Good, and that is the end of the ayah. This low here, by the way, so we typically use, there's two different ways really of saying if, right? We have low, and then we have in, or ith, or ither rather, sorry. So, we typically use in for things that can actually be realized. Like, if you do this thing, then this other thing can happen, right? But we use low if things are kind of, if only you had done this thing. If only you had done this. There's a really beautiful ayah in Surah An-Nur that I really love when Allah is speaking of a slander that's cast. So some people are casting a slander at another person, and he says, لولا جاءوا عليه بأربعة شهداء. لولا جاء, had they not, لولا جاءوا بأربعة شهداء, if only they'd come with 4 witnesses. if only they'd come with 4 witnesses. You know, he's not saying if you'd come with 4 witnesses, then we'd have believed you. Like, Allah knows they didn't come with 4 witnesses, you know. But that's just some kind of the legislation of how much evidence and how many witnesses you need to prove a slander. Anyways, so just to round up, what did we talk about? So we had a methil, which is like a parable of something, or an example of something. The verb ittakhadha, meaning to kind of take something as something, like to take somebody as a child, or to take someone as a friend, or to take someone as a leader, or something like that. You use the verb ittakhadha. Dun, the word dun, meaning before, but not in terms of time, in terms of preference usually. And then the word awliya is the plural of wali. Awliya are like protecting friends. We talked about the word ankabut and bayt and inna awhana, the word awhana meaning fragile. And I believe that's all of the vocab for this lesson. So, a nice quick one there. Yeah, but nothing wrong with that. A nice little kind of 11-minute episode for you guys to enjoy, whatever you guys are up to with your lives for the day. Our next episode will come out in a couple of days' time, inshallah. And we may do the bumblebee, we may do the wolf, we may do the dog. So there's a few different options of different ones that we may do. But I'll just round off this episode by saying you can go and click I'll only have one link in the description or in the show notes for today. So if you do want to go and learn a little bit more about the Arabic in 60 Steps exclusive program that we're running throughout this spring and summer, then do just go and check it out, inshallah. Basically, we just have a website page up, and we have a load of FAQ about sort of how the program will be delivered, what you'll actually learn, what you'll get out of it, how you can join, you know, all that kind of stuff. So any kind of information like that, obviously you can just go and find out. If you have any more questions after that, you can email me, sam@arabic in 60steps.com. Hope you guys have an amazing day. Assalamu alaikum.